Imagine a country where wealth flows from the ground, yet most of the population never sees a single cent of it, where billionaires drive luxury cars down gleaming avenues, while government critics simply vanish without explanation. Azerbaijan is a land of extremes. On one hand, one of the world's largest producers of oil and natural gas. On the other, an authoritarian regime that controls the media, politics, and even the personal lives of its citizens. But what makes this country so enigmatic? Why, despite its immense wealth, is it still a place where corruption crushes any attempt at progress? There's a common saying among Azerbaijanis. In this country, the truth has a price, and those who speak too much pay with their lives. The accusations are alarming. Independent journalists are harassed, imprisoned, or even murdered. Elections are blatantly rigged, ensuring the same group remains in power for decades. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan's elite hides billions of dollars in secret European bank accounts, buying mansions and shell companies, while ordinary citizens face unemployment and miserable wages. But this is just the surface. To understand how this small Caucasus nation became one of the most enigmatic regimes in the world, we first need to look at its geography and why its location has made it a key player in the global power game. Azerbaijan is strategically positioned between Europe and Asia, serving as a geopolitical bridge between the East and the West. Covering an area of 86,600 square kilometers, the country shares borders with Russia to the north, Iran to the south, Georgia and Armenia to the west, and has an extensive coastline along the Caspian Sea to the east. Its location has always been both an asset and a curse. Being at the center of trade and energy routes has made Azerbaijan a highly sought-after territory for empires and global powers throughout history. The country has a population of approximately 10 million people, with its capital, Baku, serving as the economic, political, and cultural hub. But Baku is no ordinary city. With futuristic skyscrapers, luxurious avenues, and architecture that blends Soviet, Islamic, and Western influences, the capital is a showcase of Azerbaijan's wealth. Yet, this wealth does not extend to the rest of the country. While central Baku shines with five-star hotels and high-end boutiques, the Azerbaijani countryside tells a very different story. Forgotten villages, poor infrastructure, and a population that rarely sees the benefits of the oil and gas fortune. Azerbaijan's climate is as diverse as its geography. The country features everything from the frozen peaks of the Caucasus in the north to the arid plains near Iran. This diversity gives Azerbaijan 9 of the world's 11 climate types, making it a uniquely varied territory in environmental terms. But more importantly, its geography has directly shaped its fate. Positioned at the crossroads of great civilizations, Azerbaijan has long been fought over by powerful empires. These struggles for control have shaped its culture, politics, and national identity, and have also created tensions that still threaten its stability today. To understand how Azerbaijan reached its current political and economic situation, we need to go back in time and explore its turbulent history. Azerbaijan's history is marked by invasions, power struggles, and a constant fight to preserve its identity. Since ancient times, this land has been a meeting point for great civilizations. Turkic, Persian, Arab, and Mongol peoples passed through, leaving their marks on the country's culture and politics. But it was only in the 20th century that Azerbaijan truly began to carve its own path, and that path would be anything but smooth. For centuries, the region was ruled by powerful empires. In the distant past, it was part of Persia until, in the 19th century, it fell under the control of the Russian Empire. With the fall of the Tsars and the Russian Revolution of 1917, Azerbaijan had a unique opportunity. In 1918, it declared independence and became the first secular and democratic republic in the Muslim world. But that freedom wouldn't last long. In 1920, the Soviet Union invaded Azerbaijan, bringing it under communist rule. Under the Soviet regime, national identity was suppressed, the economy was centralized, and any form of resistance was brutally crushed. However, an unexpected factor would end up benefiting the country: the discovery of vast oil reserves in the Baku region. During World War II, Azerbaijan became one of the main fuel suppliers for the Red Army, and Stalin knew that losing this territory could mean disaster for the Soviets. It wasn't until 1991, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, that Azerbaijan finally gained full independence. But rather than bringing peace and prosperity, this new beginning plunged the country into a devastating war with Armenia over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. This brutal conflict left thousands dead and created one of the most intense territorial disputes in the world, a dispute that continues to this day. Meanwhile, inside the country, a new regime was taking shape. In 1993, Haydar Aliyev, a former KGB member and influential figure in the Communist Party, took power and established an authoritarian government. His absolute control over politics paved the way for a system that still defines Azerbaijan today, a country ruled by the same family for decades, where elections are merely symbolic, and where any form of opposition is swiftly eliminated. Today, Azerbaijan tries to balance its identity between its Soviet past, Islamic influences, and a desire for Western recognition. At the same time, it remains a closed regime where oil wealth benefits only a select few, while the average citizen sees little to no progress. Despite this, the country markets itself as an exotic and luxurious tourist destination. But does this image of modernity and sophistication match reality? Let's find out. Azerbaijan markets itself to the world as the land of fire, a destination where tradition and modernity come together. And at first glance, it seems like they've succeeded. The capital, Baku, is a true visual spectacle. Glass skyscrapers, wide boulevards, and a seaside promenade that resembles major European capitals. But the crown jewel of the city is the Flame Towers, 3 massive skyscrapers covered in LED screens that light up Baku's skyline like dancing flames, a perfect symbol of the country's oil wealth. But not everything here is about modernity. The 15th century palace of the Shirvanshahs and the mysterious Maiden Tower transport visitors back to a time when Azerbaijan was ruled by kings and sultans. Baku's old city, known as Ikrisher, is a maze of cobblestone alleys, traditional markets, and cafes serving the finest Azerbaijani tea, always accompanied by a local sweet. For those looking to explore nature, Azerbaijan does not disappoint. The country is home to Gabustan, a desert filled with ancient rocks covered in petroglyphs dating back over 40,000 years. A true open-air museum revealing the earliest traces of human civilization. But perhaps the most bizarre natural attraction is the mud volcanoes. Azerbaijan has nearly 50% of the world's mud volcanoes, and many of them can be visited up close. Another fascinating destination is Yanar Dag, the Burning Mountain. This hillside has been on fire for centuries, fueled by natural gas escaping from the earth. It's a surreal sight, especially at night, and one of the reasons Azerbaijan earned its nickname as the Land of Fire. But there's a catch to tourism here. The government controls everything. Journalists or tourists who try to visit more sensitive areas, such as Nagorno-Karabakh, may find themselves followed, questioned, or even banned from the country. Additionally, any criticism of the government while inside Azerbaijan can lead to serious consequences. There are even stories of foreigners who were invited to leave earlier than planned. Still, Azerbaijan is pushing hard to attract visitors, aiming to become a luxury destination in the Caucasus. But does the country's economy truly support this growth? Or is there such extreme inequality behind Baku's bright lights that prosperity is nothing more than an illusion? Let's take a closer look at how the economy of this wealthy, but deeply unequal, nation really works. Azerbaijan is overflowing with oil, but that doesn't mean its people live in abundance. The country's economy revolves around the export of oil and natural gas, which account for nearly 90% of its export revenue. For years, this wealth has fueled the rapid modernization of Baku, but the reality is that this money is concentrated in the hands of a few. The average salary in Azerbaijan ranges from 900 to 1,000 Azerbaijani manats per month, $530 to $590, which might seem reasonable at first glance. However, the cost of living in Baku has been rising quickly. Renting a simple apartment in the city center can cost anywhere from 500 to 1,200 manats, $290 to $700, while an average family needs at least 600 manats, $350 per month just for groceries. Basic services like electricity and internet aren't cheap either, and many people end up spending nearly half of their salaries just to survive. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan's elite lives in a completely different world. The country has been at the center of multiple corruption scandals, where politicians and business leaders were caught siphoning millions of dollars into offshore bank accounts. In one infamous case, it was revealed that the Azerbaijani government was using a money laundering scheme to buy political influence in Europe, bribing parliament members and journalists to maintain a positive image of the regime. But Azerbaijan's economic problems go beyond corruption. The country has one of the highest hidden unemployment rates in the region. Officially, the numbers seem low, but the reality is that many citizens survive on informal, low-paying jobs. On top of that, Azerbaijan's extreme dependence on oil means that whenever global oil prices drop, the entire economy collapses. In recent years, the government has attempted to diversify the economy, investing in tourism and technology. But the big question remains, can a country that suppresses free speech and censors any form of opposition truly attract investors and build a sustainable future? The answer may lie in Azerbaijan's darker controversies, because beyond inequality and corruption, the country faces accusations of authoritarianism, political persecution, and even human rights violations. Let's take a deeper look into this darker side of Azerbaijan. Behind Baku's bright lights and oil wealth, Azerbaijan hides one of the most repressive regimes in the world. Here, criticizing the government can mean imprisonment, exile, or even worse. The Aliyev family, which has ruled the country for decades, controls everything: the media, the judiciary, and even the elections. Officially, Azerbaijan presents itself as a democracy, but in reality, any attempt at opposition is crushed before it can gain traction. Presidential elections are nothing more than political theater. The current president, Ilham Aliyev, took power in 2003, succeeding his own father, Haydar Aliyev, who ruled with an iron fist since the Soviet era. Since then, every election has been plagued by fraud allegations, and Aliyev has conveniently won with overwhelming margins. In 2009, he changed the constitution to remove term limits, effectively making himself president for life. But the worst happens behind the scenes. Independent journalists and human rights activists live under constant threat. Many have been imprisoned on fabricated charges of corruption, drug trafficking, or even treason. One infamous case was that of journalist Khadija Ismailova, who exposed money laundering schemes linked to the Aliyev family. Shortly after, she was arrested on absurd charges, a clear warning to anyone daring to challenge the system. Beyond political repression, Azerbaijan also faces serious human rights violations. Protests are banned, police use brutal force to crush any demonstration, and reports of torture in prisons are widespread. The internet is closely monitored, and even social media is watched for any critical speech against the government. And if all this weren't enough, there's also the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh, the disputed territory with Armenia. For years, this region was the site of one of the bloodiest conflicts in the Caucasus, and the 2020 war reignited old wounds. Azerbaijan managed to regain parts of the lost territory, but tensions remain high, and the threat of another conflict looms constantly. With so much controversy, the big question is there hope for Azerbaijan? Can the country overcome corruption, authoritarianism, and inequality to become a true regional power? Let's explore that in our conclusion. Azerbaijan is a country of extremes. On one hand, immense oil wealth, futuristic skyscrapers, and a fascinating culture. On the other, an authoritarian regime, rampant corruption, and a population that, for the most part, doesn't feel the benefits of this fortune. But can this reality change? The truth is that Azerbaijan is at a critical crossroads. Oil dependency still sustains the economy, but this resource won't last forever. The government knows it needs to diversify the economy and attract foreign investment. But lack of transparency and tight societal control make that a difficult task. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan's younger generation is becoming increasingly connected to the world, demanding change, opportunities, and, perhaps in the future, more freedom. Despite the shadows surrounding the country, Azerbaijan holds enormous potential. Its strategic location, unique culture, and natural resources could be the key to a more balanced future. But for that to happen, the nation must confront the deep-rooted issues that have been swept under the rug for decades. The big question is, can Azerbaijan break free from this cycle of authoritarianism and inequality to become a true powerhouse? The future remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. This small Caucasus nation will continue to be one of the world's most enigmatic and unpredictable places.